All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our February 25th, 2024 Sunday service. Today, we're going to talk about Kriya Yoga and mysticism, the meditation of uh, focusing on the divine or the sacred within. Before we get started, I do have a few announcements. The first announcement is that the retreat that's coming up in March, just south of Pittsburgh, we had two participants who can't make it, which means we have two slots open now. If you're interested in that, you can email us to learn more. Secondly, the book Understanding the Holy Science has been released, so it's now available on Amazon. It's a fairly extensive book. It's around 550 pages. And what this is a transcription of the class that we did back in 2020 on the Holy Science, Sri Yukteswar's book. So it's been edited down probably to half of what the actual transcripts were. But it is available on Amazon. And those of you who are coming to the retreat in March, you will get a copy of this book. So if you can wait, my plan is to order these to be able to give out to you for the retreat in March. And that's because the retreat in March is essentially a celebration of the equinox. And some of you may know that Sri Yukteswar was very fond of having retreats, celebrations on the spring and the autumn equinoxes. So I thought it would be very fitting to be able to offer this to you. All right, so those are my two announcements that I have today. And we'll go ahead and get started talking about this idea of mysticism and meditation and Kriya Yoga. All right, now mysticism is an interesting topic because it's not really something that you can talk about very clearly. That's why often when you've read books by mystics, or maybe you've met a person in a highly advanced spiritual state, they might not necessarily be able to speak in the most practical ways. It's because they're looking at something which is a little bit above and beyond material creation. And we can learn to access these states of consciousness through our meditation practice. And in fact, that's what we're supposed to be able to do. That's why we have the practices within the Yoga Sutras. That's why we have our Kriya Yoga techniques that we've learned from the lineage within the Kriya Yoga tradition. The idea is to learn to experience spirit directly. Now, it's important to remember that to experience spirit directly does require that we have stability within our life, stability within our mind, stability within our circumstances. Many people think that they're going to be able to practice meditation or practice Kriya Yoga and escape from the world. And that's really not the point. The point is not escape. The point is to have knowledge, to have realization. And in order to experience deeper states of consciousness, it works much better if we have stability within our life. And if you think about it, it just makes sense. If you're not worried about things like your finances, if you're not worried about all the drama in your relationships, you're going to be able to set aside time to sit down and take an interest in your spirituality, take an interest in experiencing spirit directly. And this is what I want to encourage you to do. Many people treat their meditation path like something that they do in the morning, like taking a shower. And that's good. We need to take showers for many reasons. It gets us clean. Also, when you take showers, you become grounded to the earth. You make a connection to the earth. When you practice meditation and you're doing it more as a duty or an obligation, you're keeping yourself mentally, emotionally clean in a way if you do it well. However, what I'd like to encourage you to do is start to look at your meditation path as something that you are profoundly interested in, which means, if you have a hobby, you might set aside time to go spend a weekend exploring that hobby. Or you might read lots of books on your hobby, or you're going to set aside a few hours in the evening. You're going to tell your family, I'm busy. I need to go out in the workshop and do this, or I'm going to go learn this musical instrument, or I'm going to learn to paint. And you set aside time and you go do it, and you learn it, and you pay attention, and you're interested in it. Well, in order to experience more of a mystical path with Kriya Yoga, we have to really be interested in what we're doing. And in order to do that, if our life is more balanced, if we have more harmony within our life, more stability in our life, it makes it much easier to say, okay, on Sunday, I'm going to go spend time meditating, exploring the book, The Holy Science, focusing on the deeper aspects of my consciousness to figure out what are the deeper aspects of my consciousness. And if you do that, you will start to experience these more profound states that you read about in Autobiography of a Yogi, or you'll be able to pick up Sri Yukteswar's book, The Holy Science. And when you read these kind of mystical, profound statements, you're not going to look at it and think, well, that's interesting. That's really neat. I'm glad that someone had that experience. I don't know what it means, but I'm glad that there's a person on the planet that has this kind of mystical understanding. You look at it and you ask yourself, how can I experience that myself directly? And you'll be able to spend hours doing it, and you will be interested in it. So when we're looking at this process of mysticism, number one, we do have to have harmony and order within our life to the best that we can. But we also have to really look at our practice as something very interesting, something we want to explore. Now, we also need to acknowledge and learn to cultivate an experience of divine presence. I don't necessarily talk about this a whole lot, at least in public settings, because as you may know, when you start talking about things like divine presence, that can be very inspiring. But if people have a tendency towards fantasy, or if they have a tendency to be a little maybe overly emotional about things, oftentimes what happens, instead of really exploring this feeling, this experience of divine presence, we kind of lose ourselves in fantasy. But we do have to cultivate this idea of divine presence, and that leads us to try to figure out, well, where is the divine presence? And this is where books like Swami Sri Yukteswar's Holy Science comes into play. The divine presence is not outside of us. It is within us. The divine presence, divine light, a sense of sacredness, it is within us. We will be talking about this a lot during the March retreat, and I'll try to sort of condense it or consolidate it here. But in our experience and through the understanding of yogic philosophy, there is a sense that there is a descent of spirit or a descent of divine presence into matter. And so if you explore things like the Yoga Sutras or Sankhya philosophy, there's a very precise description of how matter comes from these subtler states of awareness and this sense of spirit. It descends down, which is why we have physical things like earth, air, fire, water, and then planets and stars, and then rocks, and then plants, and then animals, and then humans. There's kind of like this evolution of consciousness, and it all is coming from spirit down into matter. And then as we become a human or an animal and then a human and so on, we develop the capacity to comprehend internal states of awareness, which is the divine state of awareness. So I'm telling you this because when you are looking for or trying to cultivate a sense of divine presence, don't look for it outside. Don't look for it outside of yourself. We have to learn to pull our attention inward, and the techniques of yoga and Kriya Yoga direct our awareness into the spinal pathway, into the chakras, And we have to learn to feel, pay attention to that subtle sense of energy within the core of our body. So this is the basis of technique, the technique which leads to a mystical experience. And it all starts by pulling your awareness within. So you get your life as balanced and as harmonious as possible, so you have time to pay attention to these things. And then when you sit down, then you have to learn to practice pulling your awareness within. And sometimes that takes a long time. Sometimes you might spend a few years practicing chanting through the chakras or Kriya Pranayama, because we don't necessarily know how much momentum each one of us has going outward. We're reversing that momentum inward. So as soon as you sit down and you begin to chant through the chakras or feel into the core, the essence of your spinal pathway, you're starting to reverse that flow, which means you are giving yourself permission to begin to sense and feel this divine presence. Now, the spinal pathway in Sri Yukteswar's book, The Holy Science, he describes this as the door between creation and spirit. So it is the door between creation and spirit. And every time you come back to feel within you this internal space, you are maybe knocking on that door. And maybe it doesn't open right away, but you do have to spend some time knocking until someone answers. And eventually you start to catch glimpses of more profound inner experience. And again, this all deals with momentum. So we have momentum of our consciousness going outward, which is how we get involved in all of this creation. And then from the spiritual practitioner's perspective, we have this momentum that we cultivate going inwards. And in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, the definition of yoga is yoga, chitta, vritti, nirodha, which means yoga, this is the best translation I can give. Yoga is the cessation or the ending of the fluctuations in consciousness. And the key word there is nirodha, which means that which ends, or bringing an end to these fluctuations. Now, every time we direct our awareness within and we start to move that momentum back into the chakras or back into the spinal pathway or back into this direction of spirit, we are creating momentum. And what happens in your meditation is after a while, that momentum will kind of catch fire and it'll get stronger. And you'll notice, I'm sure some of you have noticed this already, that there will be a moment in your meditation where you might be doing your techniques, you might be going through the mechanical process, but something happens. And just for a moment, you feel a sense of lightness. You feel a sense as though you are just pure awareness. And it can be just momentarily in the beginning, but as soon as that happens, that is a moment of what you could call nirodha. And the more you practice those moments over the course of many years, this is not something that I have seen happen within a month or more, but over many years, you start catching more and more of those moments of this sense of nirodha, which means your awareness is building up more and more momentum, such that you are more naturally becoming more conscious of spirit. And that is why we practice. And that is what this whole mystical path is about, to cultivate that, to allow it to come forth, to let that momentum build back in the direction of spirit. And one of the best ways to do this, aside from your meditation practice, is to cultivate what's called satva. And some of you know what this is, and I'll describe it. In creation, there is these cosmic forces, satva, which is light, illuminating, clear, buoyant. It's usually associated with pleasure, but not pleasure like I went and just had a cigarette and man, I feel great. Not that kind of pleasure. It's the kind of pleasure when you feel free, when you're having a moment either in meditation or maybe you're on vacation and you don't need anything. It's just a lightness, a buoyancy. Everything is okay. Your self-esteem is not an issue. Everything feels good. Again, not in this pleasurable, sensual sense, but just a natural sense of all rightness. So this is sattva. We have rajas, which is activity, transformation, accomplishing things. It can also be a sense of being dissatisfied, because why do we want to accomplish things? Because there's some kind of dissatisfaction there. And that's okay, because sometimes we need that motivation. And then there's tamas, which is a sense of heaviness, inertia, dullness, lethargy, lack of faith, doubt. Now, that's considered usually more negative, but we need that as well. For example, in order to keep a form together long enough to have an experience, we have to have at least some kind of tamas there, some kind of inertia to allow it to exist. So we don't want to get really judgmental about these things. But in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, there is an emphasis towards cultivating sattva. Roy Eugene Davis, my Kriya Yoga teacher, encouraged this. Ramana Maharshi, wonderful saint from the early 1900s in India, encouraged this. And Patanjali encourages this. And why is it important to focus on sattva? Well, sattva, as an aspect of our consciousness and as an aspect of creation, it's described as light and illuminating. All right. Now, oftentimes people think of that as like the sun back there. You know, it's illuminating everything. Well, this is, in a sense, the power of illumination as well. And by illumination, it's not necessarily physical light. It's the ability to perceive and be illuminated and know what is true. So of all of these aspects of physical creation that we have, there's tamas and rajas, and they have their place. We need them. But for spiritual purposes, the cultivation of sattva, the more we bring that into our life, the more there is an energy of illumination, which means we have a greater capacity to know what is true. We have a greater capacity to flow our awareness inward and to sense expansion, to sense the reality, the eternal essence of spirit, and so on. When we cultivate sattva in our lives, that is more likely to happen. So that is why it is important when you live your life to do things which keep you healthy, to eat in such a way that the food is light and nourishing. When it comes to how you entertain your mind, the things you read about, what you give your attention to, choose sattvic forms of entertainment. Go outside, watch the sunset. That's a sattvic form of entertainment. Go for walks in nature. Listen to soothing classical music or chanting. Anything which allows your mind to become expansive and calm and not agitated or afraid or anxious. So whatever you do, when you live your life, if you choose a sattvic approach to it, it will make it much easier for you to experience this kind of inner mystical state. All of these are supports and aids to the process. And we need these supports and aids. You know, some people say, well, we have to transcend this stuff anyway, so why even try? Well, that's kind of a self-sabotaging mentality. If there has been a tradition of teachers, a tradition, a spiritual tradition, which has illustrated a step-by-step path, it makes sense to follow that path, which will lead to this inner realization. So we need our life to be balanced to the best of our ability. And that's an important thing to remember. Why don't we want to balance our life sometimes? This is where sort of the psychology of Samkhya philosophy becomes important in yoga. We don't want to balance our lives because we're focused on rajas or tamas. Tamas is being too comfortable, being complacent. And so when there are certain things in your life where you don't want to make a change because, you know what, you're okay dealing with that problem, that's complacency, and that's tamas, that's inertia. If you're always caught up in a sense of needing to do more, be more, achieve more, you're always driven, you never take a moment to step back and just be present, that's too much rajas. And so as you look at your life and you look at it in relationship to these gunas, they're called gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas, you can start to see, oh, this is why I don't want to cultivate sattva, because I'm still really attached to tamas. This is why I don't want to cultivate sattva, because I still feel like I'm not good enough and I need to keep achieving more and more. That's rajas. So from a psychological standpoint, this can be really good for self-knowledge to understand how these things work. But we have to cultivate sattva. Even the people that you spend time with. This is the hard one, and this is where people become very complacent because they would rather spend time with individuals who are dramatic, make them feel anxious, fearful, depressed, or angry, than they would to just choose to be alone and be happy. And they would rather spend time with individuals who influence them this way than they would be alone for a little while and start looking around for people that might just be a little more uplifting, nourishing. In Sri Yukteswar's The Holy Science, he essentially says that we really need to pay attention to the company we keep. And we need to cultivate the company of people who support truth within our life. And truth means integrity. When I'm around someone who's in truth, I feel peaceful. I know I don't have to prove anything to them. They don't have to prove anything to me. We just have a natural harmony. And that is what helps to cultivate this state of sattva. So we have to look at this on a really global level in our life. But what I wanted to really get to today, other than encourage you to think about these things and contemplate them and figure out how you can begin to kind of navigate that experience, what I really wanted to do today before we meditate is talk with you about how to encourage the sacred, how to encourage a direct inner experience of divinity within you. And this is a personal process. This is not something you're going to go talk about with your friends, or you're going to say, oh, I had this wonderful spiritual ecstatic state move through my chakras. It's none of that. This is just for you because this is a personal path. And if you keep it personal, it will actually grow and become more alive and dynamic within you. So we're going to focus on this with meditation. But before we do, I want to just encourage you to kind of imagine a little bit. So I'd like you to imagine, or let's not even imagine yet. Let's just remember. Let's remember a time. This is specific to you. I'm not going to tell you my thing. You just focus on your own inner memory. Remember a time when you felt a sense of sacredness. And you might want to close your eyes and just kind of go inward. And if you've never felt that time, don't worry. We'll get to the imagination in a minute. But just close your eyes and remember a moment in your life where there was a sense of sacredness. There was a sense of presence. There was a sense of support. You know, there's a chant by Yogananda that we often do at retreats, Divine Mother. The words are, engrossed are the bees of my heart at the blue lotus feet of my Divine Mother. And then the next line is, Divine Mother, Divine Mother, Divine Mother, oh Divine Mother. And when we chant that, I encourage people to really hold a sense of, what if you were in the field, if you walked into a room and it was just permeated with this motherly energy. Now, not the smothering, mothering energy that you might have gotten from your living mother, not the kind of mothering energy, you know, sometimes where you're getting nagged by mom. I mean a full support, love, acceptance, and strength. Just a real sense of support, I think, and maybe even safety. And so if you can focus on something like that, when you felt something like that, where do you feel it in your body? What is the immediate internal experience that you have in your body? So again, with your eyes closed, feel that within your body. How does your body change? Meaning, how do the sensations within your heart or your throat or even your head or lower chakras, how does your body awareness shift the moment you remember that sense of sacredness, that sense of that field of infinite well-being. It's like being around a strong person who is your friend that you know no matter what, you're fine. And if anything happens, they've got you. That kind of certainty, that kind of peace. Okay. So now you might remember that. Let's move to more of an imagination. So again, with your eyes closed, if this field, if there was a field within you that was full of light, luminous, like a soft golden light, it just illuminated everything. And that light, you could feel it within every cell. You could feel it on the tips of your nerves. And it was a soothing, nourishing, illuminating, brilliant presence. And in your own mind, how you consider sacredness. What does that word mean to you? Think of what does the word sacred mean? And if I was feeling a sense of sacredness, what does that mean to you? You know, I can remember, actually, it occurred to me recently. Every time I see an image of someone praying, you know, I was raised Catholic, and if I see an image of someone like, you know, doing the traditional down on their knees praying, or if I see an image of like a saint with that kind of illumination coming down on them, even though I'm not really Catholic, when I see that, something happens inside of me. So much so that I was watching, Jasmine and I were watching a TV show, which is essentially a cartoon about a Dungeons and Dragons adventure. And there's a cleric in that, which is a cleric is a holy person. And in one of these episodes, the cleric was in a deep state of prayer. And it's just this cartoon. And all of a sudden it hits me like, wow, there it is again. And I felt it. So even that can encourage it. When we were in Ireland, we went to an old monastery that was falling down. And there are these tombstones within the monastery of monks who had been there. And as I walked through that place and I saw these names of these people who had devoted their life to a sense of divinity, like even that just moved me. It even started to make me cry. So this is how I sometimes can hold this sense of divinity. And sometimes it's uncomfortable because it makes you cry. But if you can allow yourself to feel that, that's okay. So anyway, in your own being, for you, what is divinity? Maybe it's being out in the garden. I can remember being out in the garden, and we had planted a bunch of sunflowers, and it was late autumn. And I was just watching the sunflowers move with the wind. And I was watching the light kind of come through, shining backwards through the backs of the sunflowers. And that itself kind of struck me as a sense of divinity or a sense of sacredness. So it can be anything. Now, where do you feel that in your body? That's what I want you to focus on. Where do you sense this in your body? This is timeless. This is not subject to any physical or human whim, thought, or emotion. This is a field that is accessible to you whenever you can tune into it. And it is your meditation techniques, your study of philosophy, you're living a sattvic life, and you have to put attention towards it. Okay, that's the important thing. You can do all the techniques, you can live the best life, but if you don't spend time putting attention towards this mystical sense of sacredness, it's not likely to necessarily come forth. And so we're trying to encourage a balanced approach to this process. Okay. So you can open your eyes now. Now, what you just did was just an exercise. And it's very important to remember this exercise. And when you feel inspired, do the exercise. Because when you focus on something like sacredness and a sense of divinity, even if you're using your imagination, that's using part of, we have a soul, and the soul is not just our physical form. The physical form is an expression of it, but it deals with our mind and our emotions and our imagination. The imagination Our inner feeling is a part of us. We have sensation in our fingertips, but we also have inner sensations. And when you can look, feel, put your attention towards something like this, um, you begin to become more sensitive to it. And that's the whole point of this process of trying to kind of cultivate a sense of the mystical within your Kriya practice without getting goofy. Remember, you're still going to go pay your taxes. You're still going to have to take out your trash. You're still going to have to talk to your neighbors, and you're just going to talk to them like normal about the football games or the D&D game that you played. You're not going to run over and say, let me tell you about this mystical experience. That is just for you. And that's the beautiful thing about it, is that it really ignites and awakens your inner life. So what we're going to do today in meditation is we are going to, together, all of us, looks like we have about, let's see, how many people together today? Looks like between two platforms, we have around a little over 100 people. So there'll be about 100 of us doing this together all over the planet, which is nice. So let's get started. We'll just practice some meditation together. So closing your eyes, sitting up straight. Focus on the breath, and it can be good to take a few nice deep breaths in, just to kind of circulate the life force, circulate the energy in the body. So take a few deep breaths in and let it out. Feel yourself in your body, because this is the temple, this is where you start. And there's nothing wrong with acknowledging the temple, even though the spirit's the most important thing. And exhale. We'll take a moment to honor and acknowledge the teacher representatives of this Kriya Yoga tradition who've made it possible for us to be here today, to learn, study, and practice meditation together. So honor Mahavatar Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, Paramahansa Yogananda, and Roy Eugene Davis. And we'll also honor all authentic spiritual and enlightenment teachers of all traditions throughout all time and space, throughout history, and those that are with us now. And we can also honor, remember I talked about the people in the monastery who gave their lives to a sacred life. Well, there are people all over the planet doing that. And there have been since humans have been around. So let's take a moment to honor and acknowledge their consciousness, the momentum of their lives towards spirit, whether they're known or unknown. And the technique we're going to use is chanting through the chakras. And I'll give some variations on it to kind of incorporate what we've been doing. But let's start with the mechanical process first. So bring your attention down to the root chakra, down to the space between your legs. You can feel the pressure of gravity where you're sitting. And as you feel that area, mentally chant Om. Chant Om, 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 and so on, as though it is pulsating within the root chakra. And let all of your awareness flow into that space, feeling the bones, feeling the warmth, the pressure, the tissues of the root chakra. And flow your awareness up to the second chakra, just above the pubic bone, probably at the level of the bladder, back towards the sacrum. And for this to work, to really work, you have to feel the area physically, feel the area. And it can be an intense feeling, or it can be just very basic. You just feel the pressure of your clothes against your sacrum, where you just feel the warmth within your lower belly. That's all, but feel it. Chanting Om in the second chakra. And move your awareness up from the second chakra to the third chakra. So this is at the level of the navel, the belly button, but deep within, deep into the belly. And so maybe you're able to sense the movement of digestion within your belly, or you can feel your muscles in your lower back that help to hold you upright, where you feel the warmth deep within the belly, and you mentally chant Om. And flow your awareness from the belly up to the heart. And if you like, it can be helpful to place your hand over your heart. And when you place your hand over your heart, you can feel the warmth between your chest and your hand. You can feel the rise and fall of the breath, the expansion of the lungs. The heart chakra is not just in the center of the chest, it radiates through um, the muscles on your chest and the ribs. So feel your upper chest, feel the movement, feel the heartbeat. Acknowledge the sensation and chant Om. And you can keep your hand on your chest if you like, or you can let your hand down to your lap. Bring your awareness up to the throat. Feel the upper parts of the shoulders. Feel where you swallow, the esophagus. Feel the muscles in the back of the neck and the bones that hold your neck upright. And as you sense this area, mentally chant Om. And flow your attention from the throat up through the spinal pathway, through the base of the skull, into your brain, essentially, back behind your eyes, um, in between where your temples are. Imagine that you can feel deep within your skull in that area, behind the eyes, between the temples. Maybe there's a sense of electricity. Maybe there's a sense of lightness and weightlessness. But feel that area and chant Om. And flow your attention from the sixth chakra up to the crown, feeling the very top of the head, as though you can feel your awareness lifting up to the crown, up to the top of the head. Feeling the dome of the skull, mentally chanting Om. Okay, now with your awareness at the crown, I want to encourage you to remember that experience, that feeling of sacredness that we reflected upon before we began. And as you feel the crown, say in your mind, however you can, whatever makes the most sense for you, I invite this sacred field into my seventh chakra. I invite this sacredness into that field of my seventh chakra and engage your inner imagination however you need to. For me, I often have a sense of feeling and seeing sort of a rippling golden soft light. And I feel as though it's almost like an ocean that expands outward, just rippling and waving. And it touches this point of the seventh chakra within my body. And then that area of the seventh chakra itself begins to ripple and radiate with this light. That's just how I see it. So, however it works for you, invite this sense. And then flow your sensation, your awareness down from the crown again into your brain, behind is between your temples. It's as if you can feel the electricity and the water that supports your brain, the fluidity, the area of the sixth chakra. And once again, as if in prayer, invite this field of sacredness, this field of divinity, however it's real to you, to permeate the sixth chakra, the area of the body between the ears, between the temples, behind the eyes. And if you could feel that, this is the key. If you could feel it, what would it be like if this energy was palpable along the spinal pathway within the sixth chakra? Invite it. And let your awareness flow down from the sixth chakra through the base of the skull, down through to the throat. Maybe you can feel the air moving through your throat, or you swallow and you can feel the muscles in your throat. Again, ask the field of divinity, the field of sacredness, this energy of sacred presence to manifest, to be revealed within the sensation of the throat chakra. And again, in my mind, I have a sense of a soft, golden, rippling light, almost like the sun at dawn or dusk, It's as if I can feel that light exciting the atoms, the bones, the cells of the area. Like when you felt the sun on your face and you could feel the warmth and the radiation passing through. Well, you feel this within the throat. And you make it real by focusing on it, wondering what it would be like. And now let your awareness flow down to the heart. And once again, if you like, you can put one or two hands on the heart. And you can say, I welcome this field of sacredness within my heart. I welcome this field of sacredness within my heart chakra, within this doorway, flowing back towards spirit. You can feel the warmth within the heart, the rise and fall of the breath. And flow your attention down to your belly. You can place your palms over your navel if you like. And you feel deep within the belly, back towards the spine. What does that field of sacredness feel like for you? And look for this field. Invite this field, this light, this radiance, this presence. And maybe you have a sense of divine mother, divine well-being. If you could feel that within your third chakra, what would it be like? And then down to the second chakra, just above the pubic bone, back to the level of the sacrum. Bring your attention there. Sometimes for me, it also feels like a magnetic field, almost like a force that's circulating. You can feel that within the second chakra, a radiance, a peacefulness. And this radiates through your internal organs. It radiates to the hip bones. It radiates to the muscles. It enlivens all of the atoms. And flow your awareness down to the root chakra, where you feel gravity grounding you with strength into the earth. And the nature of the root chakra is that of endurance and strength, fortitude. And Sri Yukteswar, when he talks about the chakras in the holy science, he describes as though these chakras are like are churches. They're like flaming churches or candles along the spine. And that within those churches are angels or rishis, angelic powers. Now, those are just mythological words, but these are aspects of our consciousness. And by bringing awareness to these fields, to these churches, to these angelic powers within us, we are able to tap into them, feel them, sense them. So at the root chakra, if you are able to feel a sense of divine strength, the ability to endure difficulties, the ability to be strong and safe, what would that feel like if it was real for you in your being and in your body? Centered at the root chakra, imagine this, sense this. If there are things in your life that you are having to deal with, like we all do as human beings, what if you really had the strength and the capacity to handle it? What would that feel like? Or if there are no problems and you simply want to accomplish something, even your spiritual growth, but anything at all, what would it feel like if you had that strength, that support, that sacredness of the divine active within you? And bring your attention up to the second chakra again. And as you feel that area, this would be a sacred power of creativity, creative expression. It's fun to create things, to paint, to garden, to work on a machine. These are creative activities. To write poetry, to appreciate the divine in nature. As you feel the second chakra, what would your mind feel like, your heart feel like, if there was an ease to the sacred expression of the divine in your life? If your body had the creative power to regenerate itself, like a little kid when it's growing, and that kid can just handle anything because it's able to regenerate quickly. Well, what if your body felt that? How would you experience your internal world? And feel this radiance, this light ascending up to the third chakra, the place of executive function, the ability to make a decision and to engage your decision. And the ability to know when it is appropriate to act. Imagine there is a divine sense of that, a divine wisdom that guides your choices, your expression. And there is a strength, divine strength, that allows you to do what you say you're going to do. There's a woman that I play music with who's in her late 70s, and she started taking lessons again. And the weather wasn't so good, and Jasmine was concerned about whether she would make it to practice or not. And I said, she seems like someone who doesn't let things get in her way. And that in a sense is sort of a divine faculty of the third chakra, without being aggressive or pushy, of course, in tune with the wholeness of life. And flow your awareness up into the heart. In the Yoga Sutras, it says, by contemplating the heart chakra, one gains knowledge of consciousness, the field of consciousness, the wholeness, the totality. So as you feel your heart, imagine that it possesses the sacred knowledge, the sacred feeling of being one with the wholeness of life, all of nature, all of spirit. and that your life, your very expression, however complicated or simple it is a perfect, harmonious result of the love within the wholeness of life to experience consciousness. As you feel the heart, consider a feeling of love, sacredness. Sometimes we see the images of saints with radiant hearts. Well, what if that same radiance, that same sacredness was a field of awareness alive within you? How would that impact your being, your mind, your body? Flow your attention up to the throat, feeling as though you possess truth. You are an embodiment of truth. And when you hear truth, you know it. And you can only speak truth, a golden light of certainty. They say when a yogi is established in truth, whatever he or she says comes to pass. I imagine this with a radiant, white, golden, electric field around the throat and the shoulders. And the words that come out of my mouth, when it does, hopefully it's imbued with that sense of truthfulness, knowing that it is beyond hope. And bring your awareness up into the crown and the spiritual eye together, so the upper regions of the brain. I'd like to encourage you to imagine observing a saint or a sage or a holy person having a sacred experience, like waves of light coming from the crown and the spiritual eye, and an openness to an infinite ocean of light and radiance above the head. And imagine you are near this person, what you would feel like to be within that field of sacredness, of divine communion. And now, like one candle can light another without losing its own light, imagine that your chakra of the crown and your chakra, the sixth chakra, is ignited with this expansiveness, this radiance, this infinite flow with source. How would your mind feel if this were the case? How would your body feel? Make it visceral, make it reality within your being and your experience. Let's just take a moment to rest in this imagination feeling sacred field. And if you can engage this process on your own, it can be very useful to spend a lot of time doing this, to set aside, well, as long as you can focus on it and see how it impacts your consciousness over the days and weeks that you cultivate the process. But for now, let your awareness just flow back down through the spinal pathway as you feel yourself grounded into the body. You can feel the breath renewing, enlivening, circulating the life force within you, from your heart and your lungs to your brain, your hands and your fingertips and your toes. Feeling fresh oxygen, fresh blood moving through the internal organs and the muscles. Feeling the magnetic field of the bones, the crystal and the structure of the bones. And that you are aware of your body and your mind and your heart. In a sense, is a temple for spirit. And as you feel this, we can chant Om once together to conclude the meditation. Peace. All right. Thank you all for being here today. This process, this is a very good one to engage in if you can every day. But sometimes you don't necessarily have the enthusiasm or the energy or the motivation to do it. But if you're able to arrange your life such that you are well rested, you don't have a lot of drama, and things are well organized, you will have more time to do this kind of practice. It won't just be, let's do some alternate nostril breathing, let's do our Kriya pranayamas. Great, we did our Kriyas for the day. That's good. That's helpful for the body and for the mind and so on. But those techniques, that's the first stages of the 8 limbs of yoga. And we need to do those things because those are the foundation for higher practices. As you know, Mr. Davis would often talk about exploring higher realities, exploring internal states of consciousness. He would always talk about it. He would always throw it in like a line in one of his books, or if he was giving a lecture, he'd mention it. But he didn't necessarily always elaborate on it. And again, as I mentioned early on, he didn't do that, at least from my understanding, probably because he knew that people had a tendency to give themselves to fantasy. So we're using controlled fantasy in a way. But to learn to focus on these things, it starts to give you the experience of pratyahara, the internalization of awareness. And then when this becomes interesting to you, when you're able to really feel these things and feel them or imagine them, it doesn't matter, but your whole awareness becomes absorbed in these inner states, and you're able to cultivate and acknowledge a sense of sacredness, your mind becomes absorbed in them. And then you begin to experience a state of focus, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi in meditation. And the more you cultivate this, when you go into meditation, this is what's going to make your meditation very enjoyable, very interesting, very dynamic, very alive, not just a relaxation technique, not just something you have to do because 1,000 Kriyas is really wonderful to do in a day, but because it's like having a living relationship with a human being. Whereas before, you've got a good relationship, you communicate with each other, things go smoothly. Well, this is like taking it to the next level with a deeper sense of intimacy with the spiritual process. And this is why many mystics and saints talk about the spiritual path as though it's like a divine romance, not a human romance, but it's developing a deep love for this field of awareness. And the more you experience it, the more interested you become in it. And the more you experience it, the greater sense of grace you have in your life. Even when things don't necessarily go your way, there is a sense of poise and wisdom and greater understanding. So this is something very worthwhile to cultivate that will result in a greater sense of enjoyment in the process, but it will also result in jnana, or knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And it can be very healing too, on many levels. So we don't necessarily do it to engage in healing. The practice of yoga is for realization, but many times the problems that we have in life can be related to sort of the energetic field that we hold. And sometimes we hold energetic fields that are more conducive to anxiety or depression or tamasic and rajasic natures. And when that happens, we are more prone to have certain difficulties physically. Now, I'm not in any way saying that this is going to cure you of diseases and things, but it's like when a person eats a healthy diet and exercises, they are less likely to have diabetes and heart disease. Although, of course, they could develop it for genetic reasons or other reasons, but they're less likely to have that problem. So the more we're able to engage the sense of sacredness and feel it within the temple of the body, that gives you a greater chance of feeling better. That gives you a greater chance of having a greater sense of well-being. And if there are issues, you're able to handle them. And if you can't handle them, you're able to understand them as part of the bigger picture of life. So there is a lot of benefits to kind of cultivating more of a mystical approach to this. All right. So there you go. I hope you've enjoyed the presentation and you've got something to use in your practice to help deepen your technique. And once again, the final announcements we have is, those of you who came in late, The Holy Science, Understanding the Holy Science has been released on Amazon. It's a big book. It is a description or a transcription of the Holy Science class we did in 2020 with the Patreon community. It's also on the Kriya Yoga Discipleship course through Teachable. So if you're on Patreon, you can access the course. If you're on Teachable, the discipleship course, you will eventually access the course. And this would be a good book to have to help follow along. And those of you who are coming to the retreat in March, the middle of March, the weekend retreat we'll be doing, I will be giving you copies of this. So if you're going to be there and you can wait, I'll give you copies when we get there. Okay. Well, spring is almost here. We've got one more month, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. I hope you're all staying warm, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. And those of you who are in the teachable programs or the apprenticeship programs, our Q&A session will begin in about 7 minutes. So we'll end this video and then we'll pick up with the Q&A program. So we'll see you soon. Take care.